Hi everyone and welcome to your Ornament Girl tutorial. My name is Kennedy and today I'll be showing you how to create the Sugar Skull Snow Globe ornament. In this tutorial, I will be using the materials from our Sugar Skull Snow Globe Special Edition kit. So if you would like to use the exact same fabrics and embellishments that I'm showing here, you can check out the link below the video to see if these kits are still available in the Ornament Girl shop. Or if you would like to follow along using your own materials, you'll also find a link down below for the free printable supply list included with this pattern. A quick reminder before we get started, this pattern along with all Ornament Girl patterns is copyrighted and it's illegal to teach or distribute it without our permission. In order to complete this pattern, you will need a soft foam ball, fabric, ribbon, embellishments, and a few ornament making tools. Like I said, if you'd like to follow along with these exact same materials, be sure to head over to the Ornament Girl shop to snag one of our Sugar Skull Snow Globe kits while they're still available. Or if you'll be using your own materials, be sure to check out the link below the video to download your free printable supply list so that you have all of the correct quantities and measurements for your fabrics and embellishments. Once all of your tools and materials are gathered, we can begin creating your Sugar Skull Snow Globe ornament. The first thing we're going to do is make a few marks on our foam. First off, you should be using a ball that is divided into 8 segments. If you purchased the Sugar Skull Snow Globe kit, the foam ball included in your kit will already be divided with these indented segment lines. Or you can buy one of these pre-marked soft foam balls from the Ornament Girl shop. And finally, if you're using your own ball that is not already marked into 8 segments, you can find a tutorial on the Ornament Girl website for marking your ball into 8 equal sections. Once you have 8 segment lines added to your ball, you're also going to want to darken the equator or the mold line running around the center of your foam ball. This is not completely necessary, but it does help to be able to keep track of that equator as you're creating your ornament. So I'm just going to make that equator darker so that I can keep an eye on it. And then I'm also just going to add a dot to each pole marking on the foam. The pole markings are the points on either side of the ball where all of the segment lines converge. Once you've made those couple of easy marks, we can start by adding your base square. Your base square of fabric will be a fussy cut that is positioned so that there is one part of your pattern that is perfectly non-cut and sitting near the center of your square. So here I have one of my Sugar Skull designs centered right in the middle of my square, and that's what I want to center in the middle of my ornament as well. You're going to want to find the center of this sugar skull shape here or whatever pattern you have on your fabric. So I'm going to go right in between the eyes here. Luckily, my sugar skull has these symmetrical designs showing me right where the center is. And I'm going to go a little bit above the eyes, but I want to try to get this pin as close to the center of that sugar skull design as I can. And once I place it, if you want to just measure to make sure that you have about an equal amount of fabric or an equal amount of that design above and below the pin. And so I have about 1 1/8 inch below my pin and 1 1/8 inch above my pin. So I got right in the center there. Once you are happy with the center placement of your pin in the middle of your fabric design, we're going to pin this right into the pole marking of our ball, so it will also be centered on the ornament. So you're just going to push your pin right into that center pole marking. And now when you position your design on the ornament, you want to make sure that it's running vertically centered over one of the segment lines. So this vertical center black line of my sugar skull here, I'm lifting up my fabric and making sure that I can see that that center black line is centered right along the segment line. And that's just going to help us keep our image sitting nice and symmetrically in the very center of our ornament. And I'm just going to put a pin here temporarily to hold that in place along that segment line. And now I'm going to do the same for the bottom. My sugar skull design here has a line centered between two teeth. I'm going to make sure that that line is right along the segment line on the foam. And then I'm going to place a temporary pin to hold that in place as well. And this will just help ensure that our image is sitting nice and straight on the ball, and these marker pins will help keep it from pulling out of the center. And now that we have our fabric positioned, we want to pin it down, not just using temporary pins here, but we want to pin it down at the top, bottom, left, and right of the square. And for all of our pins that we place, we are going to keep them above the equator line. So this is a pretty large piece of fabric. It's already coming all the way down to the equator. So we don't need to pin all the way down here at the bottom. We're just going to pin somewhere between the edge of our center design and the equator line to hold that fabric in place. So I'm doing that at the top and the bottom of the fabric, pinning between the edge of my design and the equator. And then we're going to do this for the left and right sides as well, so that all four sides of the fabric square are pinned down. Now just check and make sure that it still looks like your design is sitting centered on the ornament. You can remove those temporary pins that were holding your center design in place. And you're going to have these loose corners of fabric here, but we are going to work around them and smooth them underneath our future layers. So you don't need to be too worried about those right now. And now that we've completed the base square, we can move on to layer 1 to start our snow globe outline around the image in the center. Layer 1 will be made up of basic triangle folds using 2x3 inch rectangles of fabric number 2. In your Sugar Skull Snow Globe kit, this is the aqua blue fabric. You're going to hold your rectangle horizontally with the pattern side facing away from you and fold the top edge down by about 3/8 of an inch. You don't have to be exact about that amount, and then you're going to crease the fold. Now fold the piece in half the opposite way and crease to find the center. Unfold the piece, and now you're going to place a pin along that center crease just a hair below the top folded edge of the piece. Now we're going to measure down from the center pin directly along the segment lines. We're going to place our first 4 triangles above and below and to the left and right sides of our center image. So I'm using my flexible tape measure to measure from the pin at the center of my sugar skull right down along the segment line on the foam, and using these segment lines to line up the edge of your tape measure. That is how we're going to keep all of our triangles equally spaced around the ornament. So be really careful to keep everything lined up with those segment lines, and you're going to pin your prepped piece along the segment line 1 1/8 of an inch below that center pin. So at the 1 1/8 inch mark, I'm pinning along the segment line on the foam. And now that our piece is pinned in place, we can create our basic triangle. I think my pin isn't quite along the segment line, so I'm just going to move it over just a touch there. All right, now we're going to create our basic triangle. You're going to pinch the left half of the fabric and fold it straight down. Now pinch the right half and fold it straight down, just overlapping the left enough that you could use one pin to hold both halves in place. And you want to swivel your piece on the pin to make sure that the center line you created along your triangle sits directly in line with the segment line on the foam. And now we're going to pin in place to hold both halves down, but the bottom of our triangle is extending past the equator line. So I'm actually going to come up into the triangle, still along the center line, but I'm going to come up by about 1/2 of an inch there so that my pin is still sitting quite a ways above that equator. Now we're not going to pin the left and right corners in place just yet. We're going to place our next 3 triangles before we pin those corners down. So let's go ahead and prep our next piece. With another rectangle of fabric number 2, hold this with the pattern side facing away from you and fold the top edge down by about 3/8 of an inch and crease that fold. Fold in half the opposite way and crease to find the center. Unfold your piece and place a pin along the center crease just a hair below the top folded edge. And this is how we're going to prep all of the pieces for the next 3 layers. So I may just start saying go ahead and prep your next piece. In that case, you will prepare it in the exact same way that we just did with this piece and the previous one. Now I'm moving to the segment line directly across from the piece that I just placed, so I'm working directly opposite of that piece, but we're going to do the exact same thing, measuring down from the center pin along the segment line on the foam, and we want to pin our prepped piece at the 1 1/8 inch mark directly along that segment line. Now we're going to create our basic triangle, folding the left half straight down and folding the right half straight down, just overlapping the left, making sure that the center line of your triangle is in line with the segment line on the foam, and then pin near the center of the triangle to hold both halves in place. Go ahead and repeat that exact same process to add a basic triangle along the left and right hand segment lines, continuing the same steps to place your triangles 1 1/8 inch away from the center and keeping them centered right along those final 2 segment lines on the foam. Once you have all 4 triangles placed, we are now going to start tucking our excess fabric underneath those triangle corners. So pick one corner of your base square and pull it down over the foam, and then you're going to smooth the extra fabric out underneath one of those triangles, and you can use a pin to hold it in place. And then you can smooth the triangle out over the foam and pin the corner in place, but make sure that all of your pins are sitting above the equator line. So here's my equator. I want to make sure my pins are sitting above that. And you want to make sure that the fabric is smooth outside of the edges of the triangles. So you don't want any fabric bubbling up outside of the triangles. You want to smooth everything down so that any excess fabric sits underneath those triangle pieces. So I'm just going to go around smoothing and pinning, keeping my pins above the equator. And I know your equator's a little hard to see right now because we have so much extra fabric, but you just want to sort of follow it around so that you can keep an eye on that equator line and keep your pins right above it. Could probably move that down a little bit. Our center pins can sit way above the equator because they're going to be hidden, but it is good to keep your corner pins closer to the equator so that they're easier to cover with the next layer. So I'm just going to keep working my way around, smoothing the corners of the base square out underneath my basic triangles, and then pinning those basic triangles in place. Once you've pinned down the corners of each of those basic triangles, smoothing as much of the base square out underneath as you could, we're now going to add the final 4 triangles of layer 1. So let's prep another rectangle of fabric number 1. We're going to prep this piece just like all of the previous basic triangle pieces. And now we're going to repeat the exact same steps, working along the segment lines that sit between the triangles we already placed. So you're still measuring down from that center pin, keeping your tape measure aligned along the segment line on the foam. And you can look down on the other side of the foam to locate that segment line. Pin your prepped piece along the segment line 1 1/8 inch from the center. Fold the left half straight down and the right half straight down, just overlapping the left, and make sure that the center line of your triangle lines up with the segment line on the foam. Pin in place near the center, and then this time we're going to go ahead and smooth out the left and right corners and pin them in place, keeping your pins above the equator line, right above that equator line where possible. Now we're going to add 3 more triangles in that exact same way, so go ahead and prep your next piece. And now we're going to move to the next segment line on the foam. It doesn't really matter which one you move to. You just want to find a segment line that doesn't contain one of your basic triangles. You're going to measure down from the center pin right at the pole marking, directly along the segment line on the foam. Pin at the 1 1/8 inch mark. Create your basic triangle, folding the left and right halves straight down, and then lining that center line up with the segment line on the foam. Pin near the center, and then pin down the left and right corners, keeping those pins above the equator. Repeat those exact same steps to add a basic triangle of fabric number 2 to the remaining 2 segment lines on the foam. Once you've added a basic triangle along each of the 8 segment lines, we can now start trimming away this extra fabric, and this will make it a lot easier to see the equator for the next few layers. And you just want to trim right along that equator line. And there is a lot of fabric to trim off here, so just take your time and be careful as you're cutting away that excess fabric, leaving a nice trim line right along the equator. Once that is all trimmed up, layer 1 is complete. Layer 2 will be made up of basic triangle folds using 2 by 3 inch rectangles of fabric number 3. In the Sugar Skull Snow Globe kit, this is tonal hot pink. You're going to hold this horizontally with the pattern side facing away from you. Fold the top edge down by about 3/8 of an inch and crease. Fold in half the opposite way and crease to find the center. Unfold and place a pin along that center crease, just a hair below the top folded edge. We're going to pin our first 4 triangles along the same segment lines that we pinned the first 4 triangles of the previous layer. So this is going to be the top, bottom, left, and right of the center image, but you'll also know that the first 4 triangles from the previous layer are covered by the corners of the triangles next to it. So that's an easy way to locate the first set of 4 triangles from the previous layer. We're going to measure down from the tips of the triangles from layer 1. So I'm still measuring directly along the segment line, but this time I'm measuring from the tip of the triangle that we placed in the previous layer. You're going to pin directly along that center line of the triangle, and I'm going to be pinning my pieces right between 1/8 and 1/4 of an inch. This will just give us a nice little outline of the color from the previous layer. On this finished ornament, I pinned right at 1/4 of an inch, and you get a little bit thicker outline. So if you want to play with the distance between your triangles, you can feel free. For this one, I'm sitting right between 1/8 and 1/4 of an inch. Now create your basic triangle, folding the left half straight down and the right half straight down, just overlapping the left. Swivel your triangle so that the center line sits in line with the segment line on the foam. Pin in place at the center, keeping your pins above that equator. And pin in place at the left and right corners, again keeping your pins above the equator so that you can trim your fabric right along that equator line. And that is how we're going to place all of our pieces for this layer. Go ahead and prep another rectangle of fabric number 3. And now we're going to pick another triangle that is from the first set of 4 triangles from the previous layer. So you could move directly across if you want, as long as you're working along one of these first 4 triangle segment lines. You're going to repeat the same process, measuring down from the tip of the triangle along the segment line of the foam. Pin your prepped piece at the same distance that you pinned your first one. So whatever measurement you picked, whether that's 1/4 inch or a little bit less, you want to be very consistent with this and keep that distance the same for all of your pieces. Fold the left half straight down and the right half straight down, just overlapping the left. Make sure your center line is in line with the segment line on the foam. Pin in place at the bottom center and the left and right corners, keeping those pins above the equator line so that you can trim right along that equator. Repeat those exact same steps to add a basic triangle to the remaining 2 triangles from the previous layer that were from the first set. So this will be above and below and to the left and right of your center image. So go ahead and complete those next 2 triangles. And once you have placed those first 4 triangles, you're now just going to repeat the same steps to place a triangle of fabric number 3 on the remaining 4 segment lines. So go ahead and prep another rectangle. And with your prepped piece, you're just going to locate one of the segment lines sitting between 2 triangles that you've already placed and just repeat the same steps. And you want to keep your measurements the same as well. So you're measuring down along the segment line from the tip of the triangle from the previous layer, pinning along that center line between 1/8 and 1/4 of an inch from the tip of the previous layer's triangle. Fold the left half straight down and the right half straight down. Make sure you are centered along the segment line on the foam and that you have an even amount of the color showing on either side of your triangle. Pin at the bottom center and smooth out the left and right corners and pin them in place, keeping your pins right above that equator line. Repeat those exact same steps to add your remaining 3 triangles of fabric number 3 along each of those remaining segment lines. Once you've added all 8 triangles, you are again going to go around the ornament and trim off the extra fabric that is extending beyond the equator. Once that is trimmed up, layer 2 is complete, and we just have one more layer left to add on side 1 of the ornament. Layer 3 is created just like layer 2, except this time we're using 2x3 inch rectangles of fabric number 4. In the Sugar Skull kit, this is the black crosshatch fabric. You're going to prep your piece in the exact same way as we have for all of our previous basic triangle folds. And this time, all we're doing different is measuring down from the tips of the previous layer, from layer 2. So along the bottom segment line, our first 4 triangles are going to go to the top, bottom, left, and right. So along one of those segment lines, you're going to measure down from the tip of the triangle from the previous layer, directly along the segment line, and pin at that same measurement right between 1/8 and 1/4 of an inch along that center line. And just like in all of the previous layers, create your basic triangle fold, keeping your center line in line with the segment line on the foam, and you want the outline of the color from the previous layer to be even on both sides. Pin at the center, keeping your pins right above that equator line, and the left and right corners. You definitely won't be pinning in the corner because that's all the way down into side 2. You're gonna pin those left and right edges in place right above the equator. Repeat those exact same steps to add a basic triangle fold to the remaining 3 segment lines that make up the first set of triangles, pinning between 1/8 and 1/4 of an inch below your layer 2 triangles. Once you've added the first 4 triangles of fabric number 4, you're going to do exactly what we did in the previous layer and add your final 4 triangles just in the exact same way as we did with your first set along the remaining 4 segment lines on the foam, being sure to keep your pins right above the equator line. Once you've added all 8 triangles, you can trim off the excess fabric extending beyond the equator. And with that, you have completed side 1. You can remove the pin from the center of the image at the middle of your ornament, and if you need to use the tip of your pin to sort of scratch the fabric fibers back into place to hide the hole, you can do that. And now you're going to complete side 2. It's a good idea to put a marker pin in the top center so that when you flip your ornament over, you can make sure that your sugar skull has the top along the same segment line. And side 2 is completed exactly like side 1. So I'm going to just give you a brief overview in the next couple of minutes here to remind you how to do each layer. But if you find yourself needing the more in-depth breakdown of each piece in those layers, you can return to the base square section of this video and just complete those exact same steps on side 2. So if you want to return to that section to get that in-depth breakdown, you can go ahead and do that now. Or if you remember the steps for placing the base square, go ahead and find the center of the image on your second fussy cut of fabric and place your base square on side 2, just like we did on the previous side. Once you have placed your base square and pinned down the 4 sides, you can now add your first 4 basic triangles of fabric number 2. Remember to place these 1 1/8 of an inch away from the center pin, and you're going to place your first 4 triangles along the top, bottom, left, and right segment lines. And be sure to only pin them at the bottom center. You're not going to pin down the corners just yet. Once you have added those first 4 triangles with the unpinned corners, you can go around just like we did on side 1 and tuck your excess fabric from your base square underneath those triangles, and then smooth the corners out and pin them in place. So go around and do that, tucking the base square under each of the corners of all of those triangles that you placed and pin them in place. Once you have pinned down each corner of those first 4 triangles, you can now add your second set of triangles along the remaining 4 segment lines. And now that these segment lines are mostly covered, you can use the center lines of the triangles from side 1 to locate those segment lines. So you're going to add your 4 remaining triangles along those remaining segment lines, 1 1/8 of an inch away from the center pin. Once you've added all 8 triangles, you can carefully trim away the fabric extending over into side 2, and you want to be very careful with the tips of your scissors because you don't want to accidentally cut any of the pieces from the previous side. So you're just going to very carefully trim along the equator, getting rid of any fabric that's extending into the first side without accidentally cutting any of those finished pieces. Now that layer 1 is complete, we can move on to layer 2. In layer 2, you are going to use 2x3 inch rectangles of fabric number 3 to place a basic triangle fold along each of the segment lines, sitting between 1/8 and 1/4 of an inch below the tips of the triangles from the previous layer. And remember to place your first 4 triangles on the top, bottom, left, and right triangles first, and then fill in the segment lines in between those. Once you've added all 8 triangles of layer 2, your ornament should look something like this. And now we're going to again carefully trim away the fabric extending over the equator into side 1, being very careful not to cut any of the triangles from the previous side. And with that, we just have one more layer left to add. For layer 3, you are going to make basic triangles using 2x3 inch rectangles of fabric number 4, again pinning these between 1/8 and 1/4 of an inch below the tips of the triangles from the previous layer, directly along each of the segment lines. Place your first 4 triangles to the top, bottom, left, and right of your center image, and then fill in between those to complete the layer. Once you've added all 8 triangles, go ahead and trim off the excess fabric around the equator, and now we can finish off your ornament with the band and embellishments. Using your long strip of fabric, hold this with the pattern side facing away from you and fold it in thirds lengthwise. You might not be able to fold the entire piece at once, and that's okay. You can just work with a few inches at a time. And now at the top center of your ornament, lay this band with the raw edges facing down, centered over the raw edges and pins around the middle of your ornament. And use 2 pins to pin that band in place. And now, keeping the band folded in thirds, you're going to continue wrapping it around the center, covering the raw edges and pins as you go. And when you return to the top center, you are going to use 2 pins to hold it in place one more time, lining these pins right up with the top center segment line. And then go ahead and trim off the extra fabric extending beyond the pins. And now that all of our fabric pieces are added, we can add the ribbon bows to the top. Oh, and I forgot to remove my pin from the center of my base square. Now we can add our ribbon bows. If you are using the Ornament Girl Sugar Skull kit, all of your ribbons will be rolled together. If you want to use these 3 long pieces of ribbon to do the loop and pin method for your bow, you can do so. Or if you prefer to mix your colors in a gift bow style, I'll show you how to do that here. You're going to start with your 2 pieces of velvet ribbon. So we have hot pink and black velvet ribbon here. You're going to hold those together and measure out 7 inches and cut 7 inches from both of those ribbons, and you're going to do this twice. So you should have a total of 4 pieces, 4 7-inch pieces of ribbon. Holding these 4 pieces together, you want to stack them so that the velvet side is facing the same way on all 4 pieces. And then holding them together, you're going to fold them in half, put the ends together to fold them in half, and at the fold at the center, you are going to pin down through the center fold, and you should be pinning into the velvet side of each of those 4 pieces of ribbon. Now flip this over and spread those ribbons out, so now the wrong side of the ribbon should be facing up. And you're going to spread the pieces out, alternating colors around the pin, and then one by one fold each end of the ribbon back onto the pin so that the velvet side of the ribbon is facing out, and you have a total of 8 loops. Once you have folded back all 8 ends, you can flip this over and take a look at the velvet bow that you've made. And now you're going to pin this directly into the top center of the ornament, right over the raw edges of that band. And now you have added your first bow layer. With your long piece of sparkly black ribbon, you are going to put the ends together, forming a fold at the center. Go ahead and cut at this fold so that you now have 2 equal pieces of ribbon. And then holding those 2 pieces together, fold them in half again. Cut at the fold so that you now have 4 equal pieces. And now you're going to fold them in half and pin through the center. And on this ribbon, it is the same on both sides, so you don't have to have one side facing upward. It doesn't matter which side you pin through. You're just going to fold those 4 ribbons in half. Make sure they're stacked together so that you could get 1 pin through all 4 pieces and pin through the center. And now flip this over, spread out your 4 pieces, and then fold each end back onto the pin to create a second bow. Once you have finished that second bow, you're going to pin it right on top of the first bow, pushing through all of those ribbon layers. And if you need to use something to help protect your finger as you're pushing through all of those layers, you can do that. And now we just have one more bow layer left to add. With your remaining pieces of velvet ribbon, fold those in half and cut at the center so that you have 4 equal pieces of ribbon. Now flip all of these so that the velvet side is facing the same way on each ribbon piece. And then holding them together, fold them in half and pin at the center down through the velvet side of the ribbon. And once you've pinned through all 4 pieces, flip them over and fold back each ribbon end onto the pin to make a 3rd bow. Go ahead and flip this over and now pin this right on top of the 2 bows that you previously placed. And this velvet ribbon is pretty thick, so you really want to sort of push that pin in as far as you can get it to make sure that everything is secured. And now you have a cute fluffy bow on top of your ornament, and we can add the hanger. With your 10-inch piece of satin cord, put the ends together and tie a knot. And now thread your extra long corsage pin with a rhinestone top. Thread that with a blue flower sequin, and then pin this directly through the knot on your hanger string. And the satin cord can be a little tough to pin through, so just take your time. And now this is going to be pinned right into the top center of your bows, covering that center pin and giving us a perfect way to hang our ornament. Now all we need to do is add a few embellishments. In the Sugar Skull kit, we've included some clear flat back rhinestones, colorful sequins, a couple more flower sequins, and then tiny silver sequin pins. We're going to start by threading a little silver sequin pin with a clear rhinestone, and we're going to pin 7 of these along the band. So your bow is centered with 1 set of your basic triangles, but with the remaining 7 basic triangles, you're going to center your clear rhinestone along the band, lined right up with the center line of those triangles. So we're going to do that all the way around the band, centered with each of the remaining 7 basic triangles. Once you've added those rhinestones to the band, we can now use your remaining embellishments to decorate the sugar skull on each side of your ornament. I'm just going to show you an example here. You can feel free to use these sequins however you want. We like to add a little rhinestone to be a sparkly tooth on each side of the ornament. And then I used my colorful sequins to outline the eyes and embellish some of the flower shapes on each of my sugar skull designs. But you can be as creative with these embellishments as you want. So go ahead and use your remaining sequin pins, sequins, and rhinestones to decorate the front and the back of your sugar skull fabric however you would like. Once you have added all of the embellishments to the front and the back of your ornament, your sugar skull snow globe is complete. I hope you really enjoyed making this fun and colorful ornament along with me. It's perfect for heading into October and the spooky season, and I can't wait to see how all of your sugar skull ornaments turn out. If you have any questions at all, be sure to let us know in the comments below the video. And if you love getting free no-sew quilted ornament patterns, be sure to hit the subscribe button to subscribe to the Ornament Girl on YouTube and be notified of future patterns just like this one. Thanks so much for watching.